Luffy fighting Kaido, one of the four emperors of the sea, and awakening his new Gear 5th transformation, I knew that my old What If Deku Had Luffy's powers had become completely obsolete. So today, I'm back to drop a remastered version of What If Deku Had Luffy's powers. So ladies and gentlemen, if you guys are excited to watch Deku have a rubber man's abilities, then definitely go down below, leave a like on the video, and do all that usual good stuff, seeing as it helps the video do so much better in the algorithm. But with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy. Alright, before we begin this story, I just want to preface this by saying I have not scripted this at all. Like I was going to, but the more that I was trying to script out ideas to make part 1 seem cool, the less I ended up finding it fun for me to do. Like I was sitting there and I was like, wait, like Izuku's gonna be way too busted from the start. Like how am I supposed to write an appealing story when Izuku's gonna be able to have reality warping abilities? This dude's literally gonna be born with Toon Force and all of the abilities that Luffy has at the start. He's gonna be straight up way too busted for me to even like think of starting to write up some convoluted story with plot lines. So just to let you guys know, this is kind of gonna be one of those turn your brain off and just listen while you wash the dishes, while you mow the lawn, while you do your homework type of videos. You feel me? So with that said, boys, yeah, enjoy. Anyways, this whole story begins with Izuku at the Quirk Hospital, right? The second that he's born, Izuku would be born with his usual green and black hair. But for some reason, and this is gonna sound really, really dark, Deku is straight up born dead. He comes out of his mother's womb like he's not breathing. His heart completely stopped. And Inko and Isashi and all the doctors are sad. Like the doctors are saddened, and Inko's crying because she's holding her baby who literally didn't even get to begin his life. But as that happens, the hospital would actually start shaking and the lights would start like glittering, like they start like going on and off. And then suddenly from Inko's position where she's holding the young baby, you would just start hearing the sounds of the drums of liberation coming from Izuku's heart. It starts thumping louder and louder and louder until finally it gets so unbelievably loud that Izuku's hair starts to change and a transformation would occur where Izuku's hair just turns completely white. His pupil color just goes yellow. And Izuku now has these bright yellow eyes with this really, really cool white flowing hair that just looks so unbelievably cartoonish. It would be in this moment that the doctors would be shocked at what just happened, saying that his quirk must have manifested and that might have just saved his life. Pretty much going on to say that when Izuku was born, he accidentally probably was choking on the umbilical cord, and that's why he came out like this. So instead of Izuku going his whole life believing that he had some sort of elasticity quirk, or a quirk where he has the abilities much to like other stories that I've done, because I have done What If Deku Was Luffy's reincarnation. But this time around, it's What If Deku had Gear 5. So I needed to give him Gear 5 at the beginning of the story by making it believable and also kind of making it make sense. My bad. The whole nature of this quirk is going to be coming due to the fact that he is going to be the reincarnation of Luffy in the My Hero Academia world. So he's not necessarily going to be having a quirk, but it is going to be like counted as a quirk, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? But anyways, after this would happen, Izuku would literally just start like this baby is not crying. He straight up just has a big bright smile. And whenever he's not smiling, he's asleep, and he's sleeping with a smile. So this is like the happiest baby ever. And as Izuku grows up, it kind of just stays like that. Everywhere that this dude goes in, the room immediately lights up. And he is just so popular because he is literally the nicest, the freest kid ever. He's always laughing, and it would get on the nerves of some people, but it would just eventually grow on you. And Izuku is just so unbelievably likable. He's like the light of the world. This dude is freedom incarnate. And because of that, Izuku would grow up, and at first, a character much like Katsuki Bakugo would really, really dislike Deku. But here's the kicker. After hanging out around him a little bit, and Izuku eventually going up to him and asking him, you know, what's up? Bakugo's all like, I don't like you, and and like he even tries to fight Deku, but Deku's just like, dude, your quirk is so cool. He's like, does it work like this? And Izuku proceeds to literally like mimic Bakugo's quirk explosion, not like literally using an explosion, but doing something similar to it within the range of his abilities. This would lead Bakugo to being like, what the heck? Because Izuku would have literally grabbed an explosion from Bakugo's hand and shot it back out, like looking really, really cool. So now Bakugo was just like, dude, what the heck did you just do? Izuku from here would go on to be like, you could use your ability in so many cool ways. You could do this, this, and this. That's awesome. And like you would just have like this scene where Izuku's just like slowly rubbing off on Bakugo. Mind you, Bakugo's not just instantly gonna start liking Deku, but because Izuku's just like never once mean to him, and he's never once being like, oh, I'm better than you. He's never done that. Eventually, like, it's inevitable. Bakugo just ends up liking Izuku, and believe it or not, they end up pretty much becoming best friends throughout their younger years. So the entirety of like the first events of the My Hero Academia story, leading up to the events of the classroom where the teacher tells them like what do they want to do when they grow up, and he eventually says that they all want to become heroes, that all takes place just like you guys would expect. Now, the first change that we actually get to the story, as in like fight wise or villain wise, would be when we get the introduction of the sludge villain, right? Just like in the original, Izuku would still take that path home just because he was like, I've never walked this way, I might as well check it out, see what's up. So he makes his way over towards the direction of like where he meets the sludge villain, and just like in the original, as Izuku would be laughing, mimicking his favorite #1 hero All Might, and even changing his face to look like him, Izuku would turn to see this gigantic sludge monster about to completely consume him. As Izuku would just turn to the sludge monster with the biggest smile he could muster, grabbing it by the cheeks before he starts extending it and playing with it like it was literal slime. At this point, Izuku would start bouncing the sludge villain like a ball and telling him that his quirk is so awesome, saying that he probably shouldn't be a villain, literally just playing with him as he's just laughing. He's maniacally laughing as he's doing this, and the sludge villain is literally starting to get wheezy, like he's starting to literally feel like throwing up even though he doesn't even have a body. As Izuku's doing this, you would suddenly see All Might coming in from the background as he would finally end up revealing himself, and he would say, I am here, just like he does in the original, right? After this, Izuku turning towards the direction of All Might would be like, All Might! And he just gets like super excited as he throws the sludge villain at the wall. Have you guys ever been walking through the mall and like you see those splat balls where like it's like a pig or like an eye or something like that, and you'll throw it at like a glass and it'll like splat everywhere? That's what he did to the sludge villain as he runs up to him and just starts shaking his hands, asking him if he can fight him. As All Might's just like, wait, what? Like, dude, like this kid, why is this kid asking to fight me? And Izuku's just sitting there with the biggest smile you could possibly imagine as he's like, hey, come on, hit me right here, All Might. As from here, All Might's like, I can't exactly do that, young man. But Izuku's just like, he's not letting up, you know what I mean? Like he straight up just wants to fight All Might. And so this would eventually lead to All Might like being like, wait, did you handle the sludge villain, kid? As Izuku, like, he's like, oh yeah, that guy over there, yeah, I used my quirk on him. Sorry about that, All Might. As All Might would let out a laughter being like, like the way that I can't even do it because the dude has such a deep and high voice all at the same time. It makes no sense. But he just lets out his iconic laugh as he proceeds to like pat Izuku on the back and tell him that he's a really interesting kid. As from here, he goes on to bottle the sludge villain, and Izuku says, I can help with that, as he grabs the sludge villain and shapes him into the shape of the bottle perfectly, shoving him in there, as All Might would just sit there and be like, wow, this kid's quirk is something else, asking him what his quirk is. As Izuku would say that originally they thought it was some sort of elasticity quirk where he could just stretch really far, but now he's starting to think it might be reality warping because he can pretty much do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Does he want to turn somebody into a literal human basketball? He can do it. Does he want to jump up in the sky and grab lightning and throw it at somebody? He can do that too. Does he want to turn himself into a giant and start stomping on everything? He can do that too. Izuku can literally do anything you can think of. Anything. And this would just lead All Might to being absolutely floored, being like, kid, like that sounds incredible, can you show me? As from here, All Might would go on to like be so distracted by how interesting Izuku is that he doesn't even remember the fact that he has a time limit. So as he's talking to Izuku, All Might literally de-transforms into a small Might form, as Izuku would look at him, give him a weird look of confusion, as his laughter just stops, and he asks him, what's up with that? As he points straight to the injury that All Might has, and All Might goes on to explain that a long time ago, he was injured by a villain. As from here, Izuku says, oh right, Chainsaw Man, I read all about that. As All Might would say, you know your stuff, kid, but no, it's actually another villain. As he goes on to explain the whole plot of All for One, and Izuku says, so you turn into this form because of this injury right here? as Izuku, grabbing onto All Might's stomach, proceeds to literally start stretching his body out in such a way that the injury just kind of goes away. Like he literally stretches it out of him as if All Might was gum itself. He starts doing that to All Might, turning his body elastic as well, as he would literally heal All Might. Like that's as simple as I can put it. All Might gets fully healed, and from here All Might can feel himself. He's like, it worked. Like I don't feel myself having the ability to go back into my Small Might form. He thanks the kid and tells him and asks him if he would like to be a successor. As Izuku, hearing this, would pretty much say that sounds tempting, but he's gonna have to pass. He doesn't think he could handle any more power than this. So All Might, even though he would be a bit disappointed, would say, well, he doesn't really need a successor for now since he's gonna be continuing his hero duties now. As Izuku would say, that's great, All Might. As All Might would go on to say, well, I guess I'm only gonna be working at UA for 1 year. And Izuku would be like, what do you mean working at UA? As All Might says that he had planned to search for a successor at UA since, you know, he couldn't stay in his strong quirk form for long. And Izuku would go on to say, well, if he is looking for a successor, he knows someone who might be of help. As from here, he would go on to pretty much like ask All Might if he's willing to come with him somewhere. And so you would just see this kid with white hair who's flowing, laughing about as they're walking down the streets, and everyone's looking at him and they're like, is that All Might? Is that All Might? And everyone's just like staring at them, you know? And Izuku's like, all right, we're here. And they're outside of the Katsuki residence now, like they're outside of his house. From here, Izuku knocks on the door and you would just see Mitsuki be like, hey, what the heck do you want? As she opens the door. From here, Izuku goes, look, it's All Might. As she's like, Katsuki, get down here. You know, Bakugo comes down. He's like, what do you want, you old hag? As he makes his way down, and then suddenly you would just see Bakugo being like, All Might, what are you doing here? You would just get like a really cliche anime scene where it's like the main character, like the character stuttering and all that stuff. Just picture that in your heads. That's pretty much what goes down, right? After that would take place, you would pretty much just get Izuku and All Might breaking down the situation and telling Bakugo that if he wants to be the successor after he graduates from UA, he might be able to hand him One for All, explaining the nature of the quirk and how he's going to be so much stronger with it. As Bakugo just instantly accepts and so decides that he's now going to do his best to become an even stronger hero, right? As he goes on to ask Izuku why exactly he didn't take it, as Izuku says, if I want those powers, I'll just borrow them from you for a bit. And Bakugo would be like, fair enough. All right, well, how do we get started? As this would begin the 10-month training course, but as Bakugo's out there doing this rigorous training with All Might, like doing his best to get stronger, Izuku would kind of just be at home doing whatever he wants, attending random sports events, like literally just like going around it. Like, I don't even know what this dude is up to, bro. Like he's just living his life. Anytime he feels like doing something, he does it. Anytime he feels like going anywhere, he goes. You know what I mean? Like this dude is so free. He does whatever and whatever he wants whenever he wants, And after this would happen, we would pretty much get I gotta think about this for a bit, honestly, because like I said, I haven't scripted this video, so I don't even know where I'm going with this. What do I even want to happen? All right, we could just get into the actual not the sports festival. What's the next event? The school entrance exam. The entrance exam. Yeah, perfect. The entrance exam. Okay, give me a second, boys, because I need a straight up UA timeline. Because I'm over here for some reason. I'm just blanking. I have this one website that I use whenever I need to. There it is. Okay, perfect. Yeah, the entrance exam mark. So obviously to this point we've covered the events of the sludge villain. Obviously we didn't exactly get to see the Kamui Woods incident, which, bro, that low-key would have been such a cool spot to start this what if on. Dude, I should have 100% made note of that, but it is what it is. Izuku would have handled the gigantic villain anyways. I mean, if Mount Lady could do it, then Izuku definitely could. But with that being said, we would pretty much get the entrance exam events going down, and Izuku, being the character that he is, would still be incredibly intelligent. So even if he wasn't, he could like stretch his neck out to cheat off of other people's tests. So regardless, this dude's gonna pass with flying colors. And after the written portion of the test would be over, we would finally have them all take the robot section of the test. Izuku would be out there waiting, literally bouncing around, like jumping up and down. The ground underneath him is trampoline like, and everybody watching this would be like, what kind of quirk is that? Is he able to turn things around himself into like super like elastic surfaces? Like, is he able to pretty much turn everything around him into like rubber? But This would lead everybody to like be staring at him as he's just super excited, when suddenly you would just see President Mike up in the audio being like, "What are you guys doing? There's no countdowns in a real fight," as he tells them, "Go, go, go," and like everybody just makes their way towards the robots. Izuku would instantly have a huge smile on his face as he would catapult himself straight into the air before then stretching his arms so high into the sky, balling them up and then leaving them to smash down like a sledgehammer as he would crush a robot instantly. From here, landing on the ground, Izuku would begin jumping all over the place as stretching his limbs as far as he can. He would proceed to throw a bunch of Gomu Gomu Gatling punches as Izuku would continue breaking out into laughter, and everybody would be watching as this student, like this random kid, is over here laughing pretty much like the Joker, just destroying a bunch of robots, and they're all wondering like what the heck they're doing here. Like, this kid clearly belongs in UA and they don't stack up to him at all. So you would just get this scene where a bunch of like students literally just look down and they just walk out of there. They're just like, yep, I don't belong in this school. And so Izuku would continue destroying robot after robot after robot until finally the zero pointer would be unveiled, which at this point Izuku would proceed to rush in as fast as he can towards the zero pointer, as slowly every single one of his limbs would begin expanding as fast as they can, his stomach growing literally 20 times its size as he turns into a gigantic balloon before a bunch of like air would start shooting out of him and he would start looking like one of those random if you guys ever driven by a car wash and then you'll see those random like inflatable things that just wait, like they just flop everywhere, that's what Izuku would do before then holding both hands in front of him. His eyes would glow red for a second and looking up at the sludgeville, I mean at the zero pointer. Izuku from here would proceed to grab the 0 point robot and smash its head in with both of his hands, clapping it, leaving the 0 pointer's head to literally turn into a tortilla standing up. From here, he would go on to grab the 0 pointer by the arm and leg and start using it as a jump rope, as Izuku would start having so much fun with it before finally yanking his arm back and throwing it straight into the stratosphere, leaving the 0 pointer, which mind you is like 100 meters tall, thrown into the air, where the 0 pointer would proceed to literally float into space. And seeing this, dude, Nezu saw everything he needed to see. That kid is going to be in this school. In fact, he needs him to be in this school. And as this would all be happening, you would just see all the teachers there, like all the pro heroes. They're just like, dude, like, we need this kid to become a hero as soon as possible. Like, this kid has to be our top priority. Like, what he just did was absolutely insane, and they need to find out more about his quirk. From here, Nezu would go on to start reading his file, being like, he has a quirk called reality manipulation. This would lead Izuku to kind of like close both of his palms together before contemplating how exactly he should go on about like explaining to Izuku that he passed, because bro, he's not about to just send him a letter. Like, Nezu's gonna pull up to his house personally. And so the very next day after Izuku would go home with a big bright smile like always, you would just hear a knock at the door, as it would be Aizawa, who looks like super sad and like he doesn't want to be there. And it would also be Nezu right underneath him. This dude is like 3 feet tall, and he's just like, "Hello there, my name is Nezu." Like, he goes on to like a shake Inko's hand, as Aizawa would go on and pretty much explain that they're here to speak with Izuku Midoriya. She's all like, yeah, I'll get my son. As she proceeds to be like, "Izuku, can you come down here?" As you would see Izuku race down the stairs, as finally he can see Nezu and Aizawa. They're like, "Hey mom, who are they?" As from here, they go on to explain that not only did he pass, but this dude broke record upon record upon record, and they would like to personally take care of all the expenses that he's going to be having while he's staying at UA. That includes their rent and all the things that they use in terms of like to live, like their food, their clothes, like their entertainment, they're going out shopping. All of that stuff is going to be covered by the school. This would lead Izuku to having a big bright smile, shaking Nezu's hand, being like, "Thanks so much." As he turns to Aizawa, seeing that he's kind of upset, grabbing his face and proceeding to like basically force Aizawa into a smile for slapping his knee and be like, "Sorry, you just look pretty tired." As from here, Aizawa would say, "That's because I am." As you would just get this contrast of Aizawa and Izuku, as he's like, "Well, Guess I'll see you in class, teach. As after this would go down, we would pretty much just get another scene happening where Bakugo's currently talking to All Might. After all the testing period would be over and like about a week would pass, All Might would go on to explain to Bakugo why he hasn't been talking to him and would tell him that he's actually going to be attending UA once more, before then explaining that he got super busy with everything and his whole hero work has been getting in the way, since now that he's healed thanks to Izuku, he's able to be a full-time hero. So he's going to be retiring in approximately 3 years, which is when Katsuki Bakugo will finally be able to graduate from UA. So this would lead to Bakugo looking towards All Might and telling him that he's going to promise to surpass him in every way by the time he's out of the school, telling him that all for one quirk, that one for all quirk is just going to be the cherry on top. And All Might would look at him before giving him a big bright smile saying, "I hope so, young man," as the screen would pretty much just zoom back over towards the direction of Izuku, who has the biggest and brightest smile as he's holding both of his straps to his backpack and will be standing right in front of his very own Hero Academia. Something in the way. Something in the way. Anyways, I just finished watching Batman, so I felt like I would drop the greatest cover to that song in the world on this video before I started. Yeah, this video is gonna be kind of a weird one because I haven't recorded it in like 6 or 5 days, and the thing is, I just finished re-listening back to part 1, and it's so funny to me because you guys never hear whenever I pause the video and I'm like, can you guys shut up? Because my family is just being super loud and I'm just like, please, I told y'all to be quiet 10 times already. And you just got my mom in the background using the blender and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's fun. Anyways, point being, in the video, I was just hearing myself and there'd be parts where I could tell I was frustrated and I was just having a blast listening to myself. But anyways, we had left off with Izuku finding himself in the perspective of UA High's doors. The second that Izuku would walk inside, Izuku would be greeted to a scene of Ida and Bakugo arguing about something seemingly really dumb. As Izuku would make his way towards that direction, before he could actually completely close the gap between them, a young girl would actually appear behind him and say, "Hey, you're the guy who saved me during the entrance exam, aren't you?" As Izuku would turn towards her and say, "Oh, you're the brown-haired girl." He's like, "Gravity quirk, right?" As she would say, "Yeah, that's me." Izuku would smile at her. He'd begin to, have up a whole conversation asking her about her quirk, and even delving into the details of her drawbacks, as Uraraka would explain that her quirk is pretty much called anti-gravity, going on to explain that its defects, or its disadvantages, is the fact that she gets these weird tummy aches whenever she uses it, and it usually causes her to throw up. As she says, "It's not pleasant." And from here, Izuku starts laughing like crazy, as he would then go on to explain that his quirk is pretty much Toon Force. As she's like, "What are you talking about?" He just goes on to pretty much tell her, "You ever seen Looney Tunes?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, you mean the show about the bunny and the duck?" As Izuku's like, "Yeah, something like that." As he goes on to explain that ability that they have to just pretty much whip things out of nowhere and do things that seemingly break the laws of physics and are pretty much impossible, that's what Izuku's quirk allows him to do. She's like, "That's incredible, but wouldn't that come with a great drawback?" As Izuku would say, "That's the thing, I don't have a drawback." She's like, "What, really?" And as they're having this conversation, you would just see Aizawa right behind them as he's like, "Are you guys done so we can finally get class started?" As Izuku turned it towards Aizawa, would be like, "What you doing, Aizawa? You feeling good today, pal?" As Aizawa would go on to say, "Just sit down." As Izuku would go make his way towards the seat, and eventually he would tell everybody to put these clothes on and meet him outside, to which everybody would do so, to which they finally end up beginning the UA quirk apprehension test. The second that they would make their way out to, actually, before I keep going, I've been having these really bad moments in time where I just completely blank out, so I'm gonna whip out the My Hero Academia timeline from the beginning. That way I'm able to just keep track of everything. Okay, yeah, I was right. Quirk apprehension. Dude, I've made 500 My Hero what ifs and I still don't remember this. So it's just come on now. Oh, also, quick side note, I'm going to be making a video called How I Make What Ifs. Just pretty much breaking down how I make the videos, how I started, and showing you guys that if I could do it, then anybody could do it. I mean, come on, I was just a 15-year-old kid in my room. But anyway, stay tuned for that video. It's going to be coming out sometime soon. Not entirely positive when, but hopefully it comes out sooner than later. That being said, though, let me get back into the quirk apprehension test. The second that this would be announced, Aizawa would actually go on a toss a baseball towards the direction of Izuku. Now this baseball would have some sort of tracking microchip within it so that they can see how far it goes. And from here, Aizawa would go on to explain to Izuku that it's his job to throw the thing as far as he possibly can, as Izuku turning towards him would say as far as I can, and Aizawa would say as far as you can. Izuku in this moment would go on to begin yanking his other arm. He would like bend his arm in such a weird way as he grabs his elbow and his other arm and begins yanking it back like a slingshot, eventually yanking it back so far that the ball would go and be sent flying like 700 and something meters into the air, as Izuku would say, "Was that good?" And Aizawa would turn to him and say, "You know, that was actually not bad." As Izuku would lift up his hand and say, "That was fun." And the second that Izuku says that, Aizawa would turn to him and say, "Fun? You think you're at UA High to have fun? You're here to learn how to be a hero. Every single time that you're out there on the battlefield, people are going to be at risk. This is life or death, kid. You're not here to have fun. You're here to do your job." As from here, he would go on to explain to all of them, turning to them and saying, "If you all think this is fun, how about we up the stakes? Person that comes in last place is going to be getting expelled from UA." As everybody being shocked at this revelation, all except for Momo Yaoyorozu and Izuku, because he kind of was given a scholarship here, so he knows he's not going to be in last place. Plus, he's kind of always positive. Would go on to just be like, "Yeah, that's a way to raise the stakes." As everybody else would be like, What do you mean raise the stakes? Dude, people are going to fail." As Izuku would say, "Just do your best and you won't fail." As from here, the test would finally be over and Izuku would have gotten towards the top of the test. Bakugo would have actually done very, very well. Izuku would have got like, let's say 3rd place. Bakugo would have gotten like 4th. You know, Todoroki would have gotten like 2nd, and Yaoyorozu Momo would have gotten 1st place, like in the original. This would pretty much lead to the entire class being, all right, well, who was in last place? To which the class would all turn towards Mineta. Mineta would look at them and would be like, "Please don't expel me." To which Aizawa would turn to him and say, "All right, Mineta, come with me." He would pretty much end up walking Mineta all the way toward Nezu's office, where Mineta would have his, you know, where Mineta would, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he would basically be expelled. Like, I was looking for a fancier way of saying it, but I'm just going blank. Oh, also another announcement. I'm going to be dropping What If Naruto Had the Lord's Eyes, aka what if Naruto could copy everything. The abilities of the Lord's Eyes is pretty much the Sharingan's copy ability, but like on steroids, so it's just insanely busted. Imagine somebody shoots like a fire style, you know, jutsu, and then behind it shoots like a wind style, or they use like a crazy like Chidori. Naruto, just by seeing this, is gonna have the ability to straight up copy it and just send it right back. That's how OP the Lord's Eyes are in Record of Ragnarok. Oh, not to mention, I'm even gonna be doing that, but for Izuku. So stay tuned for that. That's going to drop as a movie sometime soon. Not entirely positive when exactly, but it's going to be dropping and it's going to be fun. Anyways, jumping back into the video. Sorry that I keep stopping this for so much. I'm just kind of like enjoying myself today. You feel me? Like, I'm not too worried about the story, which, you know, might affect you guys. You know, I know some of you guys are probably like, you know, I don't mind his yapping, and then there's other people who are like, dude, shut up, like, get back to the story. I'm washing dishes. Like, I clicked on this to watch What If Deku, not how Xehther lives his life. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, comment down below real quick before did you guys hear that chair? My bad. I'm going into way too many tangents. Point being, the quirk apprehension test would finally end, and after that would finally, you know, reach its conclusion, we would essentially now find ourselves in the UA classroom once again, but this time I'd like to say about 2 days later. After this would have happened, everybody would have just gotten off their lunch period, and they would have their final class of the day, hero training, which is essentially the longest class of the day. It's 4 hours long. Everybody would be excited, being like, I wonder what we're gonna do today. With Katsuki being like, if it's anything like yesterday, it's gonna be lame. Suddenly, you just see All Might busting through the door saying, I am here! As, you know, everybody seeing this would be like, it's All Might! And everybody just gets super, super excited. You know what I mean? Like, they all start glazing him and stuff. Bakugo and Izuku are actually the only ones that are not quite shocked to see All Might, but they're still both just so happy. Like, they knew he was gonna teach at UA, but even then, like, they kind of felt a bit shocked. Point being, after this would happen, All Might would take them all outside, to which he would then begin presenting them what they're going to be doing with, you know, the battle trial arc, as everybody would be paired up in teams, and the first team that would be paired up would be Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya versus Uraraka and Invisible Girl.
it's kind of just going to be one of those fights where it's like, dude, like this fight is not going to be much of a fight, more of a massacre. The second that this would be announced, Bakugo would turn towards the direction of Uraraka as he would say, I'll take it easy on you, don't worry. And from here, he would turn to Deku before saying, I'm gonna kill them. As Izuku would look at Bakugo and be like, dude, they're girls, let's chill out a little bit. And Bakugo's like, all right, so 50% explosions. Izuku's like, lower, 40, lower, 30, lower, 20. Yeah, I think they could take 20. I mean, they're in hero school. As Bakugo would say, all right, sounds good. I guess we're gonna be the villains then, eh? As Izuku would say, you know, I never thought I would play the role of a villain, but it's time to get my acting in order. He would close his eyes and open them back up, as seemingly his eyes would like look at him with an evil intention behind them. And Bakugo would actually begin like feeling a shiver go down his spine. He's like, what the heck? As Izuku would turn towards him and say, come on, we gotta make sure this bomb blows up. As from here, you know, they would make their way towards the top of the room, and Uraraka and Invisible Girl would finally end up making their way inside of the room, right? Now, the best way that those two would think that they could possibly win this would be by using Invisible Girl's ability to pretty much be invisible. You know what I mean? What they're thinking is if she can completely go invisible and make their way into the room where the bomb is at, and Uraraka could be the one that opens the door as a distraction, Invisible Girl could make her way towards the bomb and grab it, making it so that they're winners even though they don't actually have to fight. They're thinking we have to use our brains, not our brawn. And so that's exactly what would happen. Izuku would be sitting down staring at the door with a menacing glare, as Bakugo would be like, you're taking it way too seriously, Izuku. As Izuku would not listen to him saying, that's not my name. As from here, you know, after that would happen, you would just see Uraraka busting into the door as she would say, stop, villains, I'm here to stop you. And Izuku would say, you and your friend over there, as he would stretch his arm out, grabbing onto Invisible Girl, making sure to grab her by the waist, as she would be like, ee! You know what I mean? Just being like shocked that like she's being touched, you know, she has no clothes on, but Izuku's not touching her anywhere bad, you know what I'm saying? She's just kind of shocked that she got grabbed, even though she's literally invisible. As Izuku would hold her up and say, do you yield? And Invisible Girl would be like, I give up. As Uraraka would be like, I give up too. You know, they're both just like, all right, what are we supposed to do? You know what I mean? They're both just scared. And Bakugo's like, are you kidding me? This was hero training for the day? I didn't get to do anything. As Izuku would say, calm down, Bakugo. What were you gonna do? I mean, they were girls. Come on now. As from here, Izuku would look down, look back up, and be like, come on, cut yourself a break. Just have a good day today. As Bakugo would turn to him and be like, did you just switch personalities or something? As Izuku would say, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they would make their way outside, to which everybody would react to the battle, and they'd be like, Izuku is clearly the MVP. As you know, Froppy would be like, I wouldn't have wanted to face off against them, Ribbit, you know what I mean? And then you would just have Momo be like, yeah, Izuku handled that masterfully. His act as a villain was great. He actually sent chills down my spine. As Bakugo would say, you're telling me, try being right next to the guy as he's doing that. But anyways, as that would happen, we would then pick our story off the very next day, as All Might would actually be handling some crime on the other side of the city before making his way back to UA. Remember, unlike in the original, All Might this time is fully healed, so this isn't going to be hampering his time with the USJ. So when the USJ period actually comes around, All Might's going to be 100% healthy. So that means that the second that Kurogiri would make his presence known, All Might would be there to jump in and handle the Nomu. Meanwhile, some of the students would have been teleported away right where they were in the original. And because none of them got seriously injured, I'm going to be saying that things pretty much remain just like they do in the original. Izuku, using his Toon Force abilities, would end up jumping into the would actually end up finding his weakness for the first time. Or actually, it's a quirk this time around. Should I still give him that like weakness to water, where like he got teleported into the water so he like loses his abilities or something like that? Nah, let's just make him completely busted. Yeah, none of that. Izuku would just fall into the water, and the second that this happens, Izuku begins to just be like drinking all the water, as his belly would begin expanding super big, and then Izuku from his mouth would begin shooting all the water back towards the direction of the villains, who are now, instead of being at a lake, they're literally being shot by like, have you guys seen those fireman hoses, like how they have like super like a high amount of pressure? That's what they would have been shot at, and some of them would have literally been launched back like 30 to 40 feet. So yeah, these villains were pretty much yielding. After that would happen, Izuku would go on to like throw all the water back up, and then Suyu would just watch this. She's like, that's gross. And Izuku would say, nah, it's not gross. I use my quirk. And she's like, it's still gross. And so they would make their way towards the direction of where the other students were, seeing as Izuku could tell that All Might kind of had that little issue handled. And All Might would piece together the Nomu in about 20 punches. As after that would take place, he would turn towards Shigaraki and actually capture him. Kurogiri would have actually ended up being stopped by Izuku, who would have used his Toon Force to hold him and grab him, pretty much turning him into a full soluble human being. As Izuku, would just be like, all right, well, you're coming with me, throwing him into one of the vans where, they take the villains, nullifying his quirk. As after this would happen, Shigaraki and Kurogiri would actually end up being taken to Tartarus, where after these events would take place, we would now get the UA Sports Festival arc. Now, two things are going to be taking place during this arc, which I think would be very realistic. We saw in the normal My Hero timeline that when All For One ended up getting, taken to Tartarus after his fight with All Might, he ends up being, obviously rescued by the League of Villains. Now, what's going to happen this timeline is that while the UA Sports Festival is going on and many of their heroes are occupied, the League of Villains, alongside a couple of Nomu, would end up breaking out Shigaraki and Kurogiri, seeing as he's an extremely important part of their plan. So even though they end up getting captured in this timeline, they end up being freed courtesy of All For One. Because of this, we pretty much just jump straight into the UA Sports Festival, and I think by the time this video ends, I should probably have covered this whole thing. But anyways, beginning with the race, or actually no, should I do the speech? Should I do the, I mean, obviously we know that with Izuku having the personality that he does in this timeline of just being literally the light of the world, he would just get everybody excited, right? Then we would have the obstacle race to which everybody does their bests, but ultimately I can see Zuku pretty much getting first place because of his wacky abilities, using them to get past these obstacles like they're no problem, and even being able to catapult himself straight to the finish line through a bunch of through not explosions like he did in the original, but just kind of catapulting himself to win, smiling at Katsuki. As after this would take place, Izuku would say, "Guess I beat ya," as Bakugo would be like, "Whatever, Deku. Anyways, you want to team up?" As Izuku would say, "Of course I do." And then he would turn towards the direction of, Uraraka and be like, "Hey, you want to team up too?" And Uraraka would be like, "Sure, I'll do it." And then, he would be just about to invite Invisible Girl because, he had fought her and he wants to, do an act of kindness for defeating her last time. But before he could do that, you would just have Mei Hatsume jump in the way, pushing her out of the way, being like, "I'll be part of your team. Can I? Let me show off my babies." As Izuku's like, can't argue with that enthusiasm. And so, that would pretty much be the team that ends up being formed in the original. Sorry, Tokiyami, you don't end up passing in this timeline. But what takes place is that they end up essentially getting past the cavalry battle through one mean or another, considering that I really don't like covering the cavalry battle unless the main character has some sort of like crazy OP instant win ability that just allows me to blitz by it. So just know they pass. Like, the cavalry battle is just so hard to cover because of the nature of it. But anyways, after that would happen, Izuku's first battle, much like you guys would probably expect, would be against Shinso. Sorry about that, guys. My phone's notifications are on. Deku versus Shinso. Now, the second that this event would start, I'd like to say that Izuku doesn't talk back to Shinso, but that's just not gonna happen. You know what I mean? It's just not. And the second that Izuku would actually go on to be placed under mind control, Izuku would proceed to just stand there. Like, Shinso's telling him jump off the stage, and Izuku's just refusing to do it. He is the freest person alive. Nobody's gonna control him or his will. So Izuku would be fighting back against it, and lo and behold, 3 seconds later, Izuku would completely break out of his mind control. As Izuku would say, "That's a nifty quirk," before then, using a Gum Gum Gatling pretty much to punch Shinso completely off of the stage. After this, Izuku would be congratulated by all the people in the stands, and suddenly, Izuku would find himself facing off against Shoto Todoroki for the second battle. Izuku would begin this whole thing off by just standing there watching what Todoroki will do, as instantly Todoroki would shoot an ice attack towards the direction of Izuku, to which Izuku would jump up into the air, grabbing the glacier by the tip of the iceberg, picking it up completely, and then smashing Todoroki with it, or at least making it seem like he did. because Todoroki would have used more ice to pretty much create a dome that would, tank most of the impact, which means that the blow that he received was way more minimal than the one that Izuku was trying to give him. From here, Izuku would go in to smash the ice cluster in his hands, causing snow to fall down on everybody, as Izuku would say, "All right, well, let me use this then," as he would create two gigantic hands, lifting them up to the sky and saying, "Dodge this!" And from here, Todoroki would form a gigantic ice glacier once more, but this time it's all spiky. So when Izuku's hands fall down to the ground, Izuku would be like, "Ah, that hurt," you know what I mean? As suddenly he'd be like, "Just kidding," and like his hands would look normal once again, As Todoroki would be like, "What the heck?" Izuku from here would speed blitz behind Todoroki and tell him that this was fun while it lasted. As Todoroki would turn towards him about to use his flame quirk, as Izuku would use his body to turn it into make it look like he has glasses, and he'd say, you wouldn't burn a guy with glasses, would ya?" To which Todoroki would shoot flame straight towards the direction of Izuku, to which Izuku grabs his hand and then turning towards Todoroki would shoot flames right back at him, before then saying, "Guess you would." As Todoroki would then be sent flying off of the arena, crashing into the stands, as he would then be eliminated and Izuku would move on to the final battle against Katsuki Bakugo. This final battle would go much like their usual training events whenever they're trying to face off against each other, with Bakugo doing everything in his power possible to beat Deku, but because of the fact that Deku knows all of Bakugo's moves and he can pretty much reduce Bakugo's quirk to be nothing, would just absolutely destroy Bakugo. This means that he would be getting first place, and unlike in the original when the League of Villains would see potential in Bakugo to be a villain, that would just completely be off the table, because the interactions that Bakugo would have this time would just be so much different. And so this would lead us students back to going to the classroom, where they would all be told about two things. Number one, you guys need to pick your hero names, and number two, you guys need to pick a hero agency internship, as the entire class would get super excited, and we would just have this 30-minute montage where everybody's picking their cool hero names. Izuku would actually go and pick the hero name. Actually, for that, I'm going to leave it up to you guys down below in the comments. The comment that I pinned down below is going to be the name that we go with. Alright, so in the last video, I don't know if you guys remember, but I ended up asking you guys to please give me some name suggestions for Izuku's hero name. And the one that ended up winning was the Liberation hero, Joy Boy, by @BryzonMoore-Heath. Your pin in the last video, so you guys will probably be able to see who it is. The comment has 23 likes, so people definitely like that one. But yeah, with that being said, that's who Izuku ends up pretty much going with. And the person that I think Izuku should internship with, which actually just kind of came to me, is Fat Gum. Now, why Fat Gum? Well, I don't know. He just has a smile on his face. He's fat and he's gum. That's the most similar thing I'm gonna find to an elastic hero or somebody with the properties of rubber. So Naruto, my bad, I just finished recording the What If Naruto Had the Eyes of the Lord part 2, so that's why I might be jumbled up. But point being, Izuku would end up making his way towards that hero's agency, and just like in the original timeline, Ida's brother would still end up being paralyzed from the waist down by the hero killer Stain. I mean, he got let off easy, right? But because of that, Ida would still end up wanting to seek revenge on him, and because of this would end up leading to Ida finding himself one-on-one with the hero killer, where I don't know if you guys remember, but in the original, dude was straight up gonna die, because he wasn't a hero in Stain's eyes for heroic reasons or to try to be a fighter for justice. He just wanted revenge, and that's possibly one of the things that Stain hates the most. So, because of this one specific reason, Ida would literally be killed by Stain. After this would happen, this would end up halting all of the other hero agencies that would have been currently taking place. And because this would have pretty much been happening, let me actually look up the MHA timeline real quick before I forget. Let me do this so I don't forget the order of events that I'm supposed to be covering. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Anyways, yeah, because of that, everybody's internship stuff would literally be put on hold. And so would school. School would literally shut down for an entire month. After UA would have to deal with so much bad publicity, it would actually almost look like the school would have to shut down entirely. I mean, dude, one of its students literally died. And this isn't like what happened back then when, with what happened between Aizawa, Present Mike, and Shirakumo. Yeah, Shirakumo, or Kurogiri as most of you guys know him. This isn't like that. This is even worse. So this would pretty much end up leading UA to almost shutting down, but luckily, because that like the other students were like willing to wager for it, and even the Tenya Ida family was willing to fight for UA to stay open, they would ultimately do so, returning back to school where they would take the rescue training race, and that event would pretty much not matter anything at all in the grand scheme of things, so we're just going to completely skip through that, to which we would finally jump into the final exams arc, which would happen about 2 weeks after they return to school. Not like in the original where it was pretty much like a day afterward. No, they're going to have like 2 weeks, not only to prepare for this, but to catch up on some of their training activities that they didn't do, or at least that most of them didn't do. Because Bakugo and Izuku, they definitely would have trained and kept themselves busy doing other things during this time. So after this would happen, all of the students would end up taking the final exams test, and when it would finally be time for Izuku to face off against his opponent, Izuku would actually be faced off with All Might, just like in the original, with his teammate being Katsuki Bakugo. All Might chose this specific pair because he wanted to see how Bakugo would do and Izuku would do in a battle against him. And so that's exactly what would happen. Izuku and Bakugo would both rush towards the direction of All Might, and they would make quick work of him, with Bakugo not even having one for all yet. But this ultimate experience would end up leading All Might to believe that Bakugo is pretty much ready to receive one for all, and he would tell Bakugo that honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that he was healed already, he would have literally gave him the quirk on the spot, which would cause Bakugo to have a huge smile on his face and think, thank you, All Might. As, you know, from here, we would just have All Might, you know, like kind of nod at them. And because of the events that happened during the death of Ida, during the hero agency, this means that we would entirely end up skipping the forest training camp arc, which means that the hideout raid arc doesn't even happen. That entire section of the story is literally lost. And so instead of that, we would just get about 2 weeks worth of normal hero student course activities. And so we would finally find ourselves after about, let's say 2 weeks, with all of the students taking the provisional hero license exam. And so all of the students would get down to their bus where they would be greeted by another group of students, one of them who seems to be very, very nice, and who Izuku would actually like go over and be very nice to, when suddenly he would reveal that he is not at all as nice as he made himself out to be. This would lead Izuku to really not caring about things, and so as his team would basically make it into UA and everybody would shoot their balls towards him, Izuku would cause his belly to expand so far that all the balls would ricochet, and they would actually go on to hit some of the people that were throwing the balls in the first place. This ultimately would lead Izuku to grabbing all of the balls, as you know, like his entire body would begin stretching and grab all of the balls as he would like shoot them all out from his mouth, putting them inside of his mouth as it filled up, kind of like a squirrel's cheeks. You know what I mean? He began to just be like spitting out all the balls towards the rest of the students. A bunch of them would begin to be eliminated as Bakugo, jumping up into the air, would then begin spinning as AP shots would begin being shot everywhere, and some of the students would be taken down not permanently in like the sense of death, but like they straight up get knocked out, so they can't continue. Todoroki from here would create a wall of ice around them, as the entirety of Class 1A would simply just walk towards the unconscious bodies and tap them, including Bakugo, who thought that he might as well not just waste time. I mean, he has nothing to prove, right? He's gonna be the #1 hero one day. Since that's something that he's competing with Izuku, he doesn't care about beating anyone but him. And so what would end up taking place after this is the students would end up getting their hero licenses, and unlike in the original where Todoroki and Tsukasa, or wait, was it Tsukasa? I think it was Tsukasa. I think that's his name. Tsukasa. I believe it was. It's the Shiketsu High student, right? He would not end up having a altercation with him in this timeline because Izuku was just kind of there to like be like, Todoroki, get your head in the game. As so, you know, Todoroki would do so, and the entire class would actually end up passing. This means that after all this would happen, unlike in the original, we wouldn't get a Deku versus Kachan Part 2 fight, and so we're able to easily move on to the overhaul arc, where unlike in the original where the students were allowed to go during their hero agency, stuff like that, this time around, the school would actually be a little like cautious about who they actually allowed to go intern with. And so it would pretty much end up going down like this, where there was only going to be five choices that the students could go to, and the groups would be in groups of 4 so that they can protect each other and keep each other accountable in case they try to like go off the rails or something like that. And so Izuku would be placed in the group with Sir Night-Eye, alongside Mirio, Katsuki Bakugo, Todoroki, Kaminari, and Kirishima, and I believe that's 5 students. So with that being said, all of them making their way towards the overhaul room would actually, or no, not towards Sir Night-Eye would end up all being accepted, seeing as Sir Night-Eye would, in this timeline, because there's 5 students here and it's kind of his responsibility to actually train them, would not be able to just be like, hey, take this stamp, and if you don't, you're not participating. You know what I mean? Like, he's not able to do that. And so they would go on a hero patrol where the students would end up bumping into Overhaul. Unlike in the original, like you guys would kind of expect, where like you would get like this moment where Izuku and Mirio both have fat regrets over what happens to Eri. That is just non-existent. The moment that Izuku sees Aries and he looks into her eyes, he can just know that there's pain behind those, there's fear. And looking into the alleyway, Izuku can see Overhaul, as Izuku's just not having any of it. Izuku, turning towards Eri, would look at her and ask if he's bad, as Eri would just look at him with fear in her eyes. And the second that Naruto sees that, or Izuku sees that, he would speed blitz Overhaul, punching him in the stomach, sending him crashing through the entire building, as Overhaul would have puked out blood, vomit, spit, everything, dude. And the dude would be unconscious, as suddenly Todoroki would appear right next to him and freeze both of his arms, as this would lead Overhaul completely unable to use his quirk, and the entire Overhaul Shisaki raid would go down way smoother than in the original, with all of the groups actually making their way there and taking out the entire Hisaki Overhaul Shisaki house raid, the Overhaul raid pretty much. This means that all of that stuff that we get in the original with like the crazy fights and stuff like that, and Izuku and Eri and her healing him and stuff like that, that doesn't even take place. Overhaul is pretty much turned into a villain of the week, as after that would take place, we would essentially find ourselves with all the students back at UA High, as their spirits are pretty much on high alert. They would now be taking part in the UA School Festival arc, and as this would be taking place and all of the students are happy and they're having a great time, you would suddenly see an explosion go off in the background, as Gentle Criminal and La Brava would end up making their entrance, and Izuku seeing that Gentle Criminal was actually causing a massive problem for the school, and noticing that this was going to completely ruin Eri's happiness, would jump over there, as a bunch of the heroes and himself included would take care of Gentle Criminal, making him out to seem like he was not even a big deal. And so everybody would continue celebrating. But because of all the confusion and all the chaos, the League of Villains would finally make their entrance once more, as a massive amount of flames would become shooting towards the direction of the crowd that was there witnessing the UA School Festival arc. Suddenly, you would see a gigantic ice glacier come in, as it would protect them, and the ice would begin melting as heroes would begin saying, "Get out of here!" And so the League of Villains would end up arriving, causing chaos during this event, as everybody would begin getting into 1v1 battles with their own opponents. Todoroki would face off against Dabi, Izuku would face off against Shigaraki and a couple of Nomus, Bakugo would face off against Spinner and Stain, who would actually be part of this group now. And so we would just get these random 1v1v1v1v1 battles where the students and the heroes that are actually present there would actually be taking part in this battle, until finally all of the League of Villains students would finally be taken care of, and a portal would have actually ended up taking All Might to a separate location, where All Might would find himself surrounded by hundreds of Nomus. The Nomus at this point would begin like beating down on All Might, and they would all try to kill him, as All Might would do his best to stay afloat of all of this. But Izuku, realizing that All Might was no longer there, would quickly wonder how in the world All Might ended up like being taken away, and so he would end up realizing that All Might was sent away to a different location, to which he would grab onto the collar of one of the League of Villains, villains that was just one of the small fry, and he would ask him where in the world he was teleported to, as the villain would smile, telling him, "I'll never tell you." And Izuku, finally like being mad for the first time ever, would just kind of like begin to punch this dude, as he would finally end up cracking under the pressure. And Izuku, the second that he realizes where All Might was teleported to, would instantly fly over there, rushing there as fast as he possibly could, as he would arrive and All Might would be down on his knees, with Nomus holding him from every angle, as All For One would stand over All Might and begin sucking the quirk out of him. But before this entire process could even like take place, or even a second of it could pass by, Izuku would land in front of him and send All For One crashing through all of the Nomus. It'd be at this moment that Izuku would begin using the powers of Gear 5th to just annihilate every single one of the Nomus that's standing there, until finally All For One, seeing the devastation that this kid was causing with his quirk, would be stunned. Izuku in this moment would turn himself into a giant before lifting his arm and leg up and looking like one of the characters that we would have seen during the Skypiea arc, and would slam his foot down on All For One, as it would just crush him entirely. Even though he put up 7 barriers to stop him from actually making contact, the power and the haki that Izuku would have let off in this moment, which would be Conqueror's haki, would be enough to knock out all the Nomus that have no sentience, and this would just lead Overhaul to being absolutely destroyed. After this would take place, Izuku would go over to All Might as he would ask him if he's okay, and All Might would cough, saying that he's fine. As All Might's eyes rolled to the back of his head, and hours later All Might would wake up in a hospital as Izuku and Bakugo would be standing over him. It'd be in this moment that All Might would look up, telling them that his time as a hero is unfortunately over. During that battle, he sustained major injuries, and he'll be lucky if he can even walk again. As it would be in this moment that Izuku would turn towards All Might and say, "Maybe I can help." But All Might, seeing that Izuku was just so happy, would just turn to him and be like, "I don't think there's helping this time, kid." As from here, All Might would give Bakugo his hair, and Bakugo would go on to ingest it, as Bakugo would feel the power of All For One course through his veins about an hour later, and in that moment he would be like, "Nothing's happening," as All Might would say that it takes time for the thing to digest. So because of that, All Might would go on to pretty much smile, and turning towards the direction of Izuku, he would say, "For now, he's fine like this." As Izuku, turning towards All Might, would say, "Yeah, but I'm not," as he would place his hand on All Might's body, and he would begin to pretty much start healing All Might, using his Toon Force like abilities to work a miracle in All Might, as All Might would stand up and feel reinvigorated. And in this moment, All Might would tell the two kids to go out there and become the most powerful heroes there's ever been, change the world, and go plus ultra. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'm going to be ending What If Deku Had Gear 5th. Let me know what you guys thought about this video in the comments down below, and let me know what other My Hero Academia suggestions you guys have in the comments for me to do next time. But with that being said, it has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video! Like it or die! That wasn't the line, Kachan! Whatever!